So let's take a look at getting rigged for muskie. I fish both single-hand rods and more predominantly now two-handed rods for muskie. So let's talk a little bit about that. For a single-handed rod, usually using a 10 or an 11 weight. A good rod for muskie fishing, kind of has a design for, it is designed for muskie. It has more of an extended rear butt, and that's going to come into play, and we'll talk a lot about this, is when we go to figure eight right at the boat. We're moving the fly in a way to get a fish to take near the boat. It's very helpful to have this extended butt. And a lot of these single hand rods too, that extended butt can allow you to make a two-handed cast. Most of the single hand rods will be of 9 feet in length. And again, as I mentioned, in the 10 to 11 weight range. Some anglers do, for bigger flies, will cast 12 weights. I think that's a lot of rod to cast during the course of the day, but for the bigger flies, that can be the way to go. I also use, and I use quite a bit, quite regularly, are two-handed rods. So these are designed for overhead, two-hand casting. These rods are generally 9 foot 9 inches, 10 feet in length, a little bit longer than their single-hand rods. The idea here is to, instead of double hauling, which we'll be talking about when you use a single-hand cast, the two-hand cast overhead utilizes both hands in the casting approach, with the bottom hand pulling as much as the top hand is pushing. Creates a lot of line speed. To me, the future of musky fishing with a fly rod is with two-handed rods. It's just so much easier, so much less wear and tear on the body, so much more efficient in getting the fly back in the water. If you're out on a musky water and you see gear anglers, they're almost always fishing with two-hand. If they're casting their baits, their spinner blades, almost always using two-handed rods to cast. So it just really makes total sense that if we're casting big flies, that we also use two hands to make the musky cast. So I think really in time, more and more anglers will adopt this approach, and we'll be talking quite a bit about it in one of the next chapters. As far as lines go, I look in terms of there being three main type of lines that I use. One is, and really what I use quite a bit, it's just a sink tip line. Usually these lines are going to be anywhere from where the tip section is going to be somewhere in the 20 to 30 foot length. Generally a lot of them are built 25 to 30 feet. I kind of cut mine back, and I'll talk about that a little bit more in a second. These are integrated, where they have a sink portion integrated into either an intermediate or a float portion of the line. That intermediate or float portion is just going to be a thinner running line. So these lines are designed to cast so that just the head of the line is past the tip of the rod, maybe a little bit of overlap with the running line. You're going to have your running line stripped out at your feet, and you make your cast and you shoot that running line that you've stripped out. The one thing that with these lines is that you need to buy the weight that is going to balance your rod. So generally 350, 400, 450 grain lines balance with a 10, 11 weight, maybe even a 500 grain line. And it certainly goes up for the two-handers. Most of the two-handers I'm casting balanced with like a 550, 600, even 650 grain sink tip. The one thing that I like, that I prefer with my two-handed rods though, is that the tip section be fairly short. And I like a section that's about 22 to 23 feet in length, ideally. And not always, there's only just a few lines on the market that allow you to kind of have that length, yet enough weight to be able to balance the rod. But what the shorter head does at 22, 23 feet allows me to load up the rod very quickly, and really the efficiency in that allows me to get the fly back in the water much quicker and have it fishing a lot longer. So that's my approach with the sink tip. I also use, from time to time, intermediate lines. So the intermediate is a good match for when you're fishing more shallow water or real clear water situations where you're trying to get the fish to kind of come up to the fly. So, good. It's also a good line for fishing, wider range of water, smaller rivers and smaller lakes, shallow weed beds, things of that nature. And occasionally I'll use a floating line as well. Sometimes there are opportunities for fly fishing or for dry fly fishing, not dry fly, but surface, where we're using big surface poppers, frog patterns, things of that nature. Mainly low light periods tend to be the best, but there are some smaller rivers where surface flies can be quite productive. So something to have in the repertoire. I don't fish on the surface a lot myself, but there's certainly opportunity to do it on many waterways. In terms of reels, so I have a number of musky rods. I think it's important to invest in a rod that really suits the type of water you're fishing, suits your casting style. But certainly in terms of where a reel fits into that budget, the reel really isn't all that important in musky fishing. A lot of times, we'll talk about this later on, but a lot of times I'm ending up fighting a fish just by stripping in line. And almost, I would say 95% of the time when I land a muskie, it's just stripping in line. The reel never really comes into play. I mean, it's good to have a reel with a good drag system, just in case. It's certainly important that the reel has enough capacity to have some backing, hold your entire fly line. But in terms of it being an important or an integral part of landing the fish, it really isn't, and it usually isn't part of that equation. So, just as you're balancing your budget to buy some musky equipment, certainly the reel isn't as important as the rod or having a balanced line along with that. You can probably ask 10 different musky anglers how they rig their rod, and you'd probably get close to 10 different answers. I try to keep really a simple approach to my rigging, my leaders. I think simple is best in this situation. So I'll let you kind of in on how I do it. For the most part, really one of the key parts of the rig is to have a very smooth connection between the fly line and the leader. We'll go over this quite a bit later, but every time that we complete the presentation for a muskie, you're going to be stripping that fly all the way back so that the leader is going to come all the way into the tip of the rod, all the way, I usually take it all the way to the bite guard, about 18 inches away from the fly. So that connection between your leader and the fly line is constantly going in and out of the tip of the rod. So it's really important that that connection is extremely smooth, while at the same time it needs to be extremely strong. So what I found to be the best approach is to use a Albright knot. So I'm doubling over the fly line, and this works even with the thickest fly lines. And sometimes my heads that I'm using, I'm cutting them back so that I can fit the right length. And I have a pretty thick piece of fly line on that head, so that even makes getting that connection in and out of the tip that much more difficult. So I use an Albright knot, doubling back the fly line, tying in my Albright, and making sure that I slide that Albright knot all the way down to the very, very end of that loop, so it kind of crushes that loop down a little bit, makes that diameter a bit smaller. Get a nice tight, nice tight knot there. Really, really careful seating that knot, all the turns seat properly along the line. I'm going to trim the tag end of the leader material very close to the end there. I'm going to touch that with just a spot of glue so it doesn't slip through. And then the part of the fly line that has doubled back, I'm going to take some GSP tying thread and tie that down, lash that down so there's no little lip there, so it's nice and smooth when it goes through either direction. I'm also going to put some super glue on that as well. But that creates the best connection that I have found in terms of something that can slide in and out of the tip, easily and not get hung up when it does. For the most part, I'm just using in one straight long line, a leader, and it's usually going to be 30 or 40 pound fluorocarbon. It is just going to be one length, and in water where the water is off color, getting the fly away from the fly line isn't that important. That leader length might only be 3 or 4 feet. In real clear water conditions that I have, on my home waters quite a bit in the summertime, I'll extend the length of that leader out 6, 7, 8 feet so I can get a little more of a stealthier approach. The longer leader length makes casting a little bit more difficult, makes getting the next cast after you've done your figure eight a little more cumbersome. So the shorter leader definitely makes casting easier, but the longer leader adds to some stealth. As we've mentioned, muskies have teeth, big teeth, sharp teeth. They can slice through monofilament or fluorocarbon without much problem. So it's important to use a bite guard. And what I usually use is wire, knottable wire, something that I can actually affix to the fly or affix to a snap. And that allows me to make a nice, easy connection. There's a number of knottable wires. I mean, this is one area where it's, when I first started in musky fishing, there wasn't many options on the market. Now there is, some really good options with wire. That's usually I'm just using something that is 26 to 40 pound breaking strength, but something that'll easily, tie your various knots. You can also use, and I caution this, you can also use heavy fluorocarbon as a bite guard as well. So 100, 120 pound fluorocarbon. I will say though that, for the most part, I advocate wire because it really is 100% effective. Fluorocarbon still can be bitten through, so it's a question of both ethics and potentially losing a big fish that you've worked so hard for, but the idea of leaving a fly in a muskie's mouth is something that we would prefer not to do as well. So the fluorocarbon does get looked down upon a little bit from that standpoint. So I really do advocate wire. But if you are to go in the direction of fluorocarbon, using one that is very that has a high tensile, that isn't very flexible, one that's very strong, rigid. Generally, the harder that a fluorocarbon is to knot, the better it would be for a musky situation. Some of those softer fluorocarbons, even in 80, 120 pound tests, can get sliced through pretty easily if they're soft. So if you are going to go, again, in the direction of fluorocarbon, make sure it's something very hard and something that can't slice easily. So to complete the leader, we've talked about the attachment of the knot to the fly line, of the leader to the fly line. So we need to attach the bite guard. One real simple way to attach wire, and it's, again, you're probably going to get various opinions from other anglers, but man, one way that I think the simplest is to just do a double surgeon's knot with this knottable wire. So you just do a double surgeons from the fluorocarbon to the knottable wire. Just make sure that when you're seating that knot, that you do it very slowly, lubricate the knot, and just pull all the ends tight, evenly, and just really make sure that's good and secure. But that is makes for a good, secure, easy, low profile knot when you're using wire. I like to keep the tag ends just a little bit longer on this knot, just so that I'm going to be stripping the fly back to that knot every time. And I like to have a nice hard stop right at my tip. I want to be able to feel that and have this distance from the rod tip to the fly. For the fly itself, again, I keep that knot pretty simple. You can use just like a 3 or 4 turn surgeon or improved clinch knot to the fly. And when I do that, I try to cinch that knot real slowly and kind of work it into place with my thumb so that it'll keep this wire nice and straight. If you pull that tight too quickly, what happens is generally you'll get a little bit of a curving, in the wire itself. But if you use your thumb and just push that into place, you'll get a nice smooth connection. If you'd like to, if you feel like you maybe get a little bit more movement with the fly, if you had a loop knot, just using a loop knot like the lefty non-slip loop knot, really good connection. And that's the same thing. You're going to be doing 3 turns on the with the tag end, and you just want to make sure that when you're tightening the knot, you do it nice and slow, and it'll result in just a nice straight piece of wire. So those are really 2 knots if you want to go directly to the fly. Sometimes if I feel like I'm going to be making a lot of fly changes during the course of the day, and I don't want to keep shortening my wire every time I make a fly change, I'll go to either a snap or one of these fast attach clips. So I'll tie my improved clinch to the snap or the fast attach clip, and then that allows me to make quicker fly changes, but more importantly allows me to maintain the same distance in my bite guard so that I can strip down to that bite guard knot and know I always have the same distance between the fly and the knot itself. Just be careful make sure that if you're using either clips or fast attaches that they're from reputable manufacturers. Make sure that the snap is one that's going to stay secure all the time. I've had a couple over the years that have opened up, and you don't want that to happen, especially if you have a big fish on. So just really make sure that they're a reputable manufacturer. Do some research. Make sure you get a good. But I do like that. I do like the idea of using a snap. But I've had a couple clips that have bent out on me, so it's really important to get high quality clips. You'd hate to lose a muskie because of a situation like that. I remember one day I did have one that was just, the clip opened up and it was just kind of hanging. Somehow the hook was still hanging on the end of the clip. And I definitely stopped using those after that. But there are some high quality ones on the market. It does add a little bit more, tackle to the front of your fly. Probably makes it a little less stealthy. So when I think the water's clear and I think stealth is important, I do like to try to go directly to the fly without a snap.